Hi everyone, welcome to WW Designs. My name is Nikki and today we are going to talk about all things fussy cutting. I do a lot of fussy cutting. I use printables. I destroy magazines, saving every fun little bit that I can. And so I use fussy cuts a lot. I have had quite a few people ask me to do a video on fussy cutting, even though I would have thought it's quite simple. You just grab a pair of scissors and start chopping. But there's probably a few things that I have learned over time. So I thought I might just do a video and share with you how I go about all of this. And hopefully you'll all learn something, or I don't know. But why don't we have a play and see? So first things first, obviously fussy cutting, if you're a junk journaler, is basically a necessity. Thanks to the influx of printable junk journal kits, we have to do a lot of fussy cutting. This is my current state of printables. I've got just a few there, as you can see. Now, a lot of people love to fussy cut in advance, and that's fine if that's your jam. But as a general rule, I don't. I find once I fussy cut something, if I don't use it, I then have to decide where I'm going to put it, because I tend to store my things in a variety of ways. So what I do, if I want something, I go through my folder and then I chop it out and I fussy cut that particular item. I find it a lot easier if I'm looking for things and I might not even be sure exactly what I want. It's easier to flip through pages than containers and envelopes and things where I happen to have fussy cuts stored. So any printable that I purchase or freebie that I get, when I print it out, if it hasn't been used, it goes into this folder. And I have lots of them. But this way, what happens is the actual fussy cuts don't get damaged. Especially if I've done things on normal copy paper or from magazines, they can be quite flimsy. So if you have them all sort of in a batch and you're rifling through to find what you want, things can get damaged. So I find things stay in much better condition if I keep them on their whole sheet until I actually want to use a particular piece. So that is my set of printables, of which there's just a few. Then the next thing I do, I have these containers. This is one of my many storage systems that I use. I have done a video on how I organize and sort all these things. And if I remember, I'm going to pop it in the description box below so that you can see how I do it. But what these are for are mostly magazine images and things that I've saved. This particular one is an actual proper fussy cut arrangement, ready-made. I've just popped the little scrap in there. But what I do when I take things out of magazines, I have a big tub for whole pages that I don't know what I'm going to do with, or it might have a multitude of things on it that I love, so I keep them as whole pages. But you might have a whole magazine page and the only thing you want to keep is this little flower, for example. So what I do, I just trim quickly around. I don't actually fussy cut it. That way, I don't care if these edges get a bit rough and ready. When I'm ready to actually use it, then I fussy cut it out. So you can see all these little bits, I just fussy cut around roughly. And when I'm ready, and I'll explain now why I tend to do that, because when you're going to fussy cut, there are two things you have to consider what you actually want to do with your fussy cut. So I've got a few little things here to help me explain what I mean. So traditionally, when you fussy cut something, you try and get as close to the edge as possible, and you end up with this perfect little piece to use. For example, this flower here, I actually made into like a little mini piece by backing it to pop into a journal, and I've cut it as perfectly as I possibly can. I would probably try and do the same with this, but depends on what you want to do with them. So, for example, have a look at this. I did this in a video the other day. As you can see, on the pencil, and on this flower, and even on this. Actually, no, this was a pre-made fussy cut. I didn't cut that one. I left a little bit of white around the edges. So if you have a very busy background that you want to add things to, sometimes leaving a little bit of a white, or even if it's lightly coloured, an edge, can help things stand out a bit more. And why this is a perfect example, have a look at this little camera here. I fussy cut this out, and lo and behold, it's nicely done, but it sort of disappears because the background is just so busy. So you need to work out what you want to do with your fussy cuts and whether you want them to stand out a little bit or whether you want them perfect. Here's another example of not perfect. I've left the white on purpose so that my little bees actually stand out. I have used this on other occasions and I've literally fussy cut out every leg, and I will happily do it. But in this case, I left the white so that my little bees pop. The other thing is, when you fussy cut lots of little pieces, I find they get lost. Because they're so tiny, they get caught up in behind things. And this might be the perfect little thing you wanted. Now, I cut out this one at the same time as I did this one. And, of course, I only used one. So now I've got this little piece. And it goes in with all my other vintagey things, and it gets lost. So that's why I don't like fussy cutting out little things until I need them. With this one here, I was going to use it for something and I didn't. So I sort of roughly fussy cut it out. By doing this, I then have the choice whether I want to leave some white around the edge or not. With something like this, I've cut this out of a magazine. I did not fussy cut it perfectly because when you do things, for example, like this one here, if you don't cut it perfectly, it doesn't matter. I mean, the whole thing is it doesn't really matter anyway. When you finally stick something down, if there's a tiny bit of white or whatever, no one's probably really going to notice, and you need to not stress too much about it. But when you have perfectionist tendencies like myself, little bits that aren't right can really annoy me. But around the edge here, I did ink. So you just ink the edges, and that's what I would do with this one. Instead of, making sure it's perfect, you ink those edges and it will completely disappear. So that, of course, is perfect. Here's another one. This one here, I did cut out perfectly, or pretty much so. I think there's a tiny little bit of shadow there. But again, these smaller bits, they tend to get lost. So I try not to fussy cut things I don't need. And here, this final example here, I had pre-cut all these bits out when I did this video. And in hindsight, if I'd thought about where this fish was going to go, I would have left a bit of white. Because he gets quite dull up here and he's gone on to a dark background, he's a little bit lost. Like, it looks lovely, it's fine, but he would have popped out a bit more if I had left a little bit of white around him, and he still would have looked just fine. So there we go. That's just a few examples of what I think about before I fussy cut something. Then, of course, the next thing you have to think about is scissors. Now, there are fancy scissors out there on the market that are designed for fussy cutting. I've yet to purchase a pair because I do virtually all my fussy cutting with this. Now, if I'm doing really tiny little bits, then I do have these. These are actually embroidery scissors, but they have a lovely fine tip and they stay so sharp. I just purchased a new pair. My last pair, all of this was all rotted and gone and was literally falling off. And I, by sheer accident, found these on a website, and I didn't even realise where I bought them from. I probably bought them from Spotlight initially, and I think they're made by Birch. But these are fabulous with this tiny little point. And the only other thing I do sometimes use is a pair of nail scissors. If you have to do a rounded edge and it's enclosed or hard to get to, sometimes a little nail scissor can be helpful to sort of get around a corner. Now, these scissors, these were cheapies. I have no idea where they came from. I have had these forever. You can see they've worked very hard for me, but I'm not letting these go in a hurry. You need to find a scissor that you are just really comfortable with. Now, these I use when I'm doing my nails, not to cut my nails, but I do my own gel polish. And so when I take this colour off, I use alfoil or aluminum foil, as I think Americans call it, to wrap my nails in when I'm soaking off the gel. So I have to cut the foil up. And I have heard that if you use your scissors on aluminum foil, it helps to keep them sharp. Maybe that's why these cheapies are still working well. I don't know. I'm honestly not sure whether that truly works, but I've had these for a long time. They're comfortable in my hand. I know what they do. So these are my favourite. So you need to find a pair. They need to be sharp. You need to treat them like your fabric scissors. I have a pair of fabric scissors that are only for fabric, and these scissors I only use on thinner paper. I don't use these to hack into a piece of cardboard or anything like that. I love these. I'm happy to look after them. So now, when it comes to fussy cutting, as I mentioned, I cut out when I need something. So, for example, if you have a whole magazine page and the only thing you want is this little bit, then cut it out or tear it out before you start fussy cutting. When you're doing little delicate areas, if you have all this excess paper hanging down, it can sometimes pull on it and can cause you to fussy cut incorrectly. This just makes things a lot more manageable. So I always cut out my piece into a nice usable shape and then we cut. Now, if you are really pedantic, you can aim to cut around the outer edge of this, and that's fine. The other thing you can do if you just want to make life a little bit easier is just cut just inside the line. It's not going to matter if there's a tiny little bit of less black, but as you can see, you end up with your first go being the right go. So that's how I deal with this. And can you see when I'm cutting, I turn the paper, not my scissors. I've heard this many a time before, and it definitely does help. Just keep your hand in one spot cutting and use this to get where you want to go. The other thing I do is I regularly get rid of excess. When you're doing little tiny delicate bits, again, you don't want excess weight dragging it down, and you don't want to get your scissors caught up in that. So get rid of it. So same thing here. We're just going to go just inside the line. And as I mentioned, if you're doing vintagey things, who cares if you've got a bit of white? You ink your edges with a little bit of this stuff, just in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Distress ink, which comes in a variety of colours, and if you're into journaling, then you will have all the brownie ones like Vintage Photo and stuff like that. But there's no reason why you can't use the coloured ones either. This one here, for example, if I wanted to do it, I could put a bit of pink around the edge. It would actually look quite cute. But, so Distress ink, Distress oxide, it doesn't matter which one you use when you're doing edges. It's all the same thing. It works. The difference only really comes into play when you are using water as a medium. Then they behave very differently. So I'm just flipping this around. And just try to stay sort of just inside the edge. Then, of course, with little bits like this, if you cut off these little nobule things, I don't think that would really affect the overall look of it, but I do tend to sort of try and save every bit of it. But again, going just on the inside so I don't have to worry. If you do have a bit of white left over, that's when it can be very handy to take your tiny little pair of nice sharp scissors and just clean up the edge if you're really concerned about it. But otherwise, don't stress. The whole thing is just to make it easy. And if you like fussy cutting in advance, this is a fun thing to do when you're sitting in front of the TV, just sort of watching, not watching. If that's your jam, you could get a few pages cut. Like, sometimes I will have a bit of a fussy cutting session. If, let's say, for example, I'm making a journal and I have a kit that I want to use, I will often have a little fussy cut session and do it in advance, because knowing I will probably use up virtually all of that kit. But otherwise, I just cut as I need. And when I get to little flowers like this, I just whizzle the paper around little bit by little bit. I don't need to have every little tiny point. No one's going to know. No one's going to see. But I'm quite happy to sort of try and get a little bit of a rough edge. Now, when it comes to, and I'm going to do exactly the same up here. I don't need to worry about fussy cutting every little bit of that yellow flower. I just can't see the point. So there's a tiny bit of white up there, and you know what? That's fine by me. And I'm going to do exactly the same here. If you want to, by all means, grab your fine scissors and cut out every little bit, but don't make fussy cutting any harder than it has to be. And can you see I have not moved my cutting hand at all? I'm keeping it exactly in the same spot so that I can just use the other hand to guide where I want to go. And again, getting rid of excess. And of course, if I wanted to, sometimes when I'm doing little bits, I will flip over to my small ones, but I don't really need to. And I don't think I want that bit of pink colour there, so we're going to go right up to the edge because I don't need that bit. But I'm much more comfortable using these big scissors. You'd never think that would work well, but I find it just works the best. So if you have a pair of scissors like this, try them out. You might be pleasantly surprised. And voila! See, there's a tiny little bit of white up there, but who's going to know? As far as I'm concerned, that bit's ready to go. So the next one we're going to do is this cute little teapot. The basic cutting of it is all very straightforward. I'm going to try and work on the outside of this one, especially for like here, because it's quite fine. So instead of cutting just inside the edge, I'm sort of going to try around there to be a little bit more exact. But the bit we have to think about is this here, whether you want to just leave it as it is with that white bit in its place, or whether you want to get rid of it. And I'll show you a couple of ways we can deal with that once we've cut the main bit out. So we're going pretty slow around here because I do want to try and save this edge sort of as much as possible. Don't rush. I think that's the one very important thing. Just take it slow. The end result will be better. But this is a hand-drawn image, and if you lose a little bit of the edge, it really doesn't matter. It's not life or death. The shape is still there. Okay, so I sped that up a little bit for your viewing interest, so it didn't take too long. Now we have to tackle this inside bit. I do want to get rid of it. So the easiest way, of course, is to just bend this over and snip it. Just so you can create a hole. But can you see how you can end up with a little bit of a bend mark? Now, of course, once you glue that down, it's not really an issue. But another way you can do it is if you can fit a hole punch in without involving any of your handle, that creates a great way to get your scissors in there. The other thing you can do is if you have a scalpel, I use a scalpel to often cut things out, you can just put a little slash in there and that works really well. And then because this is rounded, I think I will just use my nail scissors to do this. And it does help doing bits that are rounded. I don't use these scissors for my nails, by the way. This is an older spare set. I think they're getting a bit blunt. I might have to get a new pair. So let's just flip to the little ones. I'm not going to try and use my big ones in here. It's not going to work for me. So we'll get these nice little ones in here. And I might get a new nail set. And there we go. I will probably trim this up a tiny bit more. But yes, I think maybe my little nail scissors that I've been using for so long are finally a little bit past it because I've got a little bit more white there than I would like. I think we'll leave that at that. That looks pretty good to me. And we now have ourselves a cute little teacup. So that's a great way to get rid of those little excess bits if you're interested. So there we go. I think that's about all you really need to know. That's how I deal with fussy cutting. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments box below, or if you've had any trouble with fussy cutting, let me know what it is and I'll see if I can come up with a solution or help you out on how I deal with that. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you. Just don't stress about them too much. Just go and cut. And all these cute little magazine images and things, this is why I cut them all out and keep them, because this is going to look absolutely gorgeous. This has a matching teacup, so I'll be cutting that one out, and that will look great on a journaling card. So definitely worth your while. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye for now.